Hi, how's it going? My name is Dylan Davis. I should be looking up here. And this is a video. Before we get started, I would strongly suggest you, is it over here? The little cog icon on the YouTube video that allows you to go 2 times speed, I would strongly suggest you use that because I'm exhausted today. I spent all day moving and it is so hot. I think I might be dead. I just don't realize it yet. Well, anyway, this video is to explain the company that I'm starting, and I really do apologize for being so slow and sluggish, but I kind of have to do this tonight, and so this is what we're gonna, this is what we got. So let's go for it. Anyway, I'm looking down at notes. So if you ever see me looking down, it's because I tried to do a quick outline as to the flow of this video, and the video is to explain to people what the company is all about. And so yeah, thanks for checking me out. Email me here if you have any questions, if you care, if you want to say that I'm a big dumb idiot and that I should, go back to college and stop wasting my life. I might, it all depends. Let's see. So why don't we get started? What's the company all about? Well, politics. Crazy, am I right? It is crazy right now, and it could take, a year and a half to explain exactly why. But one of the biggest reasons is that there is this new barrier to most of the population engaging in politics. Essentially, there was a study that came out, and the study said 90%, but if you really want to take a look at the numbers, they sugarcoated it, and it's really more like 98.5% of America is going completely unrepresented in politics. So to briefly explain, because I don't want to waste your time, if 98.5% of America believes that Bill A is absolutely terrible and should never pass, it has a certain percentage likelihood of passing. And if that same 98.5, overwhelming majority of America believes that, hey, Bill B over here is really great and it should absolutely pass, guess what? That Bill B and Bill A, they both have the same percentage of passing through the legislative process into becoming a bill. And what that essentially means is that you have no impact, and you and 98.5% of America has no impact in what happens in Washington. And it's because the game has changed fundamentally, and it has to do with Citizens United and all of that. But essentially, you can tie it even further back to just technological development. You can always tie everything back to technological development, right? But the technological development that really matters is psychology and the rise of advertising, especially after World War II. I can tell you this whole story more in depth if you care. Again, email me here and I'll be happy to explain it to you, or at the very least copy and paste some speeches that I had written out on some previous videos that I had started making and then decided to not make. Well, anyway, but I don't want to waste your time. But essentially, the game has completely changed, and unless you can engage in advertising, unless you can engage in, and it's very easy to call it propaganda. I might actually just do that. I might actually just call it propaganda from now on. Then you cannot participate in politics. Essentially what we're talking about is the cost of democracy. And if you really think about it from just a game theory perspective, there are certain assumptions that, as we're taught about our democracy, that are made all the time, such as everyone has the same information, that all information is correct, that votes count for something. And it's like all of these assumptions, they're not true. And with the voting one, it's not true anymore, especially because it's so easy to get money into politics. But, well, essentially the cost of democracy, well, what I want to make very clear right off the bat is that there is, in fact, something that we can do about this. There is a way that we can get 98.5% of America, or, hopefully as much of that percentage as possible, represented once again in Washington. I mean, if you really think about the number, it's incredibly shocking. It's worse than the times that we had during slavery. That's worse than the Revolution. That's worse than the Tea Party, right? So obviously something needs to happen, and generally speaking, you want to have as many people with the right to represent themselves. You know, you want. How can you defend your own rights in Washington from everyone else in the society if you can't even get into Washington in the first place? So I'll stop banging on that drum. Now, what exactly is the problem? In a large part, the problem is the cost of democracy, like I said, and that includes the spread of information. How do you inform, 325 million people here in America, and especially considering that some of them don't want to listen to what you have to say, they don't want to be informed, maybe they are incapable of being informed, maybe because they have some sort of brain injury or something else like that, you get what I'm saying? So it's that, and the cost of that is incredible. Now, the purpose of infrastructure in the first place, and just I hope I don't, I'm not teaching you anything new here, but the purpose of infrastructure is to lower the cost of doing a repeated task. So if you think back to Roman times, the purpose of an aqueduct is to lower the cost of everyone fetching water, everyone who uses that aqueduct, right? And that general rule can be applied to infrastructure everywhere across the country. So everyone who uses the roads are infrastructure. The cost of traveling from point A to point B, that goes down if you have good infrastructure. And so in large part, the purpose of a government is to maintain infrastructure and to lower the cost of creating wealth, okay? I think maybe I went too far there. But anyway, the infrastructure necessary to lower the cost of participating in our own democracy systematically over the last 30 to 50 years has been completely wiped out. And that's the reason that only 1.5% of us actually have real representation in Washington. I mean, if people knew 98.5% of us didn't have representation, I feel like there would be riots in the streets right now. But blissfully unaware. And these are numbers that came out like 5 years ago. I can link a study if you send me an email here. I should stop doing that because every time I do this, I have to edit it in later. Sorry, future me, sorry. Well, anyway. What was I going at? And then furthermore, there's the organizations of large numbers of people. And generally within that structure, you need trust. I forgot why I wrote that down. The point is, this infrastructure has been completely wiped out. So, for instance, back in I think it was the late '80s or the early '90s, I forget exactly when, but Newt Gingrich did a lot of things. So, for instance, he decreased the amount of money that we pay politicians, and that had a lot of effects. He also got rid of the sector within Congress. There was a committee or like a group of technical specialists that politicians could go to get technical advice on specific topics so that they could be well informed before they made their legislative decision. And he said that was completely unnecessary and frivolous spending, and he got rid of all of that. Well, you wonder why Congress people, they don't actually solve any problems anymore in today's world. It's because they had that capability taken completely away from them, and 100 other reasons. I don't want to get too into it. But the point is, this infrastructure can be built, and I think must be rebuilt in the private sector. If we want that 98.5% of Americans to be represented once again in politics, we're going to have to build the infrastructure to allow that to happen again in the first place. And we better do it. We better do it quick. So let's talk about the private organization, the company that's going to do this, the company that I'm building. Surprise, surprise, right? First of all, it's got to be a company. It's got to be for profit, just because the nature of politics is incredibly expensive, especially in today's world, especially with advertising, especially with unbridled competition. It's just endless, and every year politicians have to raise more and more money to get elected, and so anyway. And I think what's going to happen, and I'm not going to tell you all the details because I don't want to give away all my secrets. But the way that we're going to do it is we're going to create online communities. This is a technology that is absolutely viable in today's world. I mean, so many so many companies and so much of our social environment in today's world, so much of our culture is online and organized in communities surrounded upon like-minded topics or causes or so on and so forth. But that's what we would be creating is communities online that are organized not around politicians, not around rhetoric, not around anything, organized around specific issues. And this opens up a lot of possibilities for people around the country. For instance, if you're in a community that's pretty closed-minded about certain issues, but you're like closeted, you can contribute to those issues' representations without being like outed. And also, well, anyway, and the way that we're going to do this is the same way actually that the 1.5% that currently gets represented in Washington, the way that we're going to get the 98.5% represented is the same method that the 1.5% uses right now. So essentially what they do is they just pay for it. I hope I made that clear. I hope I'm not repeating myself. Like I said, I'm really tired, and I really do apologize for being slow. But the idea is if one guy with $1 million can go and essentially buy a law that he wants, I mean, it's not quite so quid pro quo, but it's close. Why can't 1 million people with $1? And like I said, that's the cost of democracy. You have to build up the infrastructure. You have to lower the cost of people participating in their own democracy, lower the cost of people organizing, lower the cost of the spread of information. And you need infrastructure to do this. And so anyway, another reason this is pretty important, well, no, I kind of already said that. Well, so why don't we go on to how exactly are we going to make a profitable organization that does something like this? I've identified like 3 ways that we're going to get money, but let me first detail the lobbying process. Essentially what we're doing is we're doing the lobbying process for the people, and in order to fund that whole process, we are opening up that whole process to the people who are funding it. So essentially, if you start off with research, this is the lobbying process. And if you're terribly rich, then what this might mean is hiring a bunch of think tanks to produce a bunch of studies for you, right? But for us, it could be as simple as combing through existing research and existing papers and reading them and making sense of them and meeting with the people who wrote them, which would give those people a perfect chance to push their book or whatever agenda that they have. You could meet with them and have them explain their papers and have them explain the science. So because nobody reads scientific papers anymore, but if you have it in a podcast form, I'm thinking like a Joe Rogan podcast, how they talk with people for like 3 hours. Well, you could do the same thing with scientists who are talking about their latest study. And I mean, literally that realm has not even been explored. What we're talking about here is content creation. But let me get back to the point. You could walk people through the research process where you are collecting existing information, you are conducting new studies, you are explaining all of this. You could go to think tanks and you could talk about possible solutions and be very creative in the brainstorming of solutions. You could do outreach, which would be online community, online communities, but events and philanthropy, which is you could talk to lawyers and you could talk to actual lobbyists. And every step of this process, we have the technology in today's world to bring every step of that process through the internet into the lives of people who want to contribute to the process overall. So if you can imagine, if we started for instance, I'm just going to pick a big one, global warming, right? A lot of people care about global warming. So we could do a series on global warming and we could go through all of the data and we could have these scientists come in and show their data and, not terribly complex, although we could get there. But, we could share that with people. Sorry, I'm repeating myself like crazy. And then we could go to think tanks and we could hire think tanks to brainstorm solutions and we could have those think tanks give presentations and so on and so forth. And not only could we videotape all of this and put it online, not only could we live stream this, so it's in real time, but you can actually, as a person sitting in their boxer shorts, in BFE, you can literally be interacting with the interviewer and the think tank representative or the scientist who's doing the research or the lawyer who you sat down in front of a live streamed camera as he's writing the bill or she's writing the bill, or the lobbyist. You could strap a GoPro on a lobbyist's shoulders, and as he walks in to meet with the politician, and every politician in the world would say, yes, this is amazing. I definitely want to have a meeting with you, knowing that there's 80,000 people watching this camera right now. That's free advertising, right? So anyway, there are so many possibilities. I'm only naming a handful that right now we could share this whole process with the people, and we could charge them for the privilege. I mean, obviously, and that's one of the ways that you would start to generate some money. That's the whole the way that you would keep the whole thing afloat. One of the ways that you could generate money is content creation, and then pay gating that content. And you could pay gate it for a period of 6 months and then release it to the public. And there's 100 million different ways to do that. But also at the same time, I've been listening to a lot of entertainment podcasts and Twitch streams, and the way that the content creation left, but also the artistic creation left, like how they create podcasts and TV shows and so on and so forth. I've been listening to a lot of that lately, and what they all do is, they all ask for money, just straight up, like, hey, donate, and that works. But what they all do, and what really works, is they create merch, I think they call it. And there's a lot of this on Twitch, and there's a lot of this on YouTube nowadays too. But they create tchotchkes that you buy for like $20, and it costs them like $2 to make. And this is an incredibly lucrative market. Now, obviously, it's, in my opinion, oversaturated, but I'm not the type of guy to buy that kind of stuff. But there are enough people out there that would, buy a mug that says, I support global warming, like a Sarah McLachlan commercial, that type of deal. I think they were probably the first ones to do it in modern times. Well, anyway, so you could create content to put online. Nowadays it is so easy to create content. I mean, look, I'm doing it right now. It's terrible content, but I'm doing it right now, and all I'm using is this cruddy laptop and this sock on this microphone, and I can put up content, and maybe if I put some effort into it, I could make a living out of it. That's not exactly what I want to do, but I would be willing to make this kind of content and turn it into a real thing. Well, anyway, so that's one of the ways that we could get money out of this whole thing. Now, another way, and these are things that we would only really be able to do once we got going, and that's a common theme that is preventing me from taking this thing off on my own, is I'm trying to figure out how to get this thing off the ground, and most of the, it's hard to convince one person to be the first person. It's hard to convince 1,000 people to be the first 1,000 people, and so there's this. There's a term for it, but it's. I'm sorry, I'm really tired right now. I can't think about it. But you need capital to get off the ground. You need to put out the appearance of, oh, this is already a thing. Would you like to join this already a thing? And then people are more likely to say yes, and then all of a sudden it becomes an actual thing. It's like fake it till you make it kind of stuff. Although, I don't know, that might have a negative connotation. Anyway, point is, these are some of the things that we can do once we get going. And these are not all the things. Obviously, I'm not trying to share all of my secrets with you. But first of all, obviously, we can affect policy. Now, hopefully, I don't have to explain that that's the whole point of all of this, is to give the 98.5% of America that doesn't have a voice right now, to give them a voice. But there are so many strategies that we could use to actually affect policy if we had a continued, substantial monetary presence in Washington, and honestly, it wouldn't even cost that much. I mean, for instance, the for-profit prisons, right? That's a big thing. They've spent less than $20 million lobbying the government, and obviously that's what's above the board. So maybe you round it up to 20, maybe you take it up to 30, right? That is a huge issue that affects a huge number of living human beings. And they've spread out that $30 million, not all at once, they've spread it out over decades. So they've been able to secure their position to get what they want for, pennies on the dollar. Like, quite literally, anyone who engages in lobbying, there's a quite well-known and accepted industry standard of for every dollar that you put into lobbying, you're going to get $214 back. If you're a company who's trying to protect your kind of trade or lower tariffs on your kind of trade, or get some sort of government enforced monopoly, et cetera, et cetera. I hope I don't really have to explain this to the kinds of people who will be watching this. Lobbying is incredibly lucrative, and that's why it's taken off in the hands of the richest sector of our society. And that's also why, in large part, that's why our society is so, I couldn't think of this word earlier, so separate. There's the rich people, and then there's all the fucking poor people. And excuse my French. And it's because of self-reinforcing processes like these. So anyway, but there are a lot of strategies that we can use there, and I don't want to waste your time. But also, when we get large funds specifically earmarked for lobbying, especially after we've already accomplished whatever lobbying we've promised, or that we feel needs to be done. If we have money left over, we can use that money however we see fit. I would say that we should put it into a watchdog fund. So let's say that we raise $10 million for global warming, right? Well, we would raise a lot more than that, but let's say we raise $10 million and we fix the problem by spending $5 million. That's not going to happen, but we're using fake numbers, okay? So now we have $5 million left over. Well, what are we going to do? Are we going to burn that money? No. Are we going to distribute it back out to the people? God, no. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that money and we're going to put it in a watchdog fund, or what we could do is put it in a watchdog fund. So now that $5 million just sits there waiting for someone to, repeal any of the progress that the lobbying movement made. And this is a way to help movements survive past the limited attention span of the public. But also, while that money's sitting there, you could use that for whatever you wanted to, and specifically investment. I mean, that's how Warren Buffett made his money in the first place. That's how he made his billions, was he bought an insurance company, and they had all of these, these stacks and stacks of cash just sitting there waiting for someone to claim it, someone to get in an accident or whatever, or a house to burn down, and for them to claim that money. Well, he realized that it was totally legal for him to take that money and invest it, as long as he was able to cover any claims that were made. And that's how he started off on his fortune. And so investment's really not that hard. I mean, I can think of a couple of secrets right now. So like, for instance, just because it has to do with lobbying, what you can do is you can follow congressmen, like acting congressional, I was going to say congressmen or congresswomen. And if there's any unexpected deaths, any companies that they are inextricably tied to because of their legislative position, then if they die unexpectedly, then those companies that they're tied to over the next 2 weeks, they drop by 25 to 30%, pretty much every time. And sometimes it completely wipes out a company. So it would be incredibly easy to set up some sort of an automated trading system and some sort of a database, which we'll get to the database in just a moment, that can make investments or I forget what they call them. Do they call them puts or options? I forget. But you can basically bet that a company's value is going to go down over the course of the next 2 weeks. And if it does by some certain amount, then whoever you made the bet with has to pay you. And so, you could bet some company or something like that. And it's so weird to me that, and obviously this is all very indicative of a corrupt system. And that's kind of sort of what we're trying to fix. We're trying to introduce a note of competition into the lobbying world to, at the very least, stop the wealth redistribution that's happening right now. So now let's talk about the database. I mentioned information, and this is probably the third way that we can make money, the third way that I've identified so far that we can make money is to collect information. I mean, this could be a great opportunity, not just to collect information on the customers, which I think is probably the intuitive, because that's what the public discourse is in today's world, is collect information on the people who are signing up for this and to sell that information. I'm really, really reticent, or I really don't want to do that. But what we could do is sell the anonymized information, and that would help us keep the ship afloat if we needed to do that. But also, we could collect all kinds of information as to what's happening on the Hill. And now, the generous thing to do would be to just open that up into the world. And by the way, when I say collect information, I mean, you could have guys who are sitting there watching who walks into so-and-so's office, and they're just sitting in the lobby, as a lobbyist who has some meeting at the end of the day, and he shows up at the beginning of the day. I mean, there's all kinds of like spy stuff that you could do. But there's also all kinds of work to be done on figuring out who is putting money where, and what lobbyists are representing what interests, and how are those interests being funded. And there's all kinds of light that you could shine on the Capitol, and it would be difficult not to make a profit in the process. In fact, I think you can say that for this entire venture it's politics in 2019. I think it would be difficult to get into the business and walk away poorer than you started, which kind of brings us perfectly to the close. Like, why am I making this video? If I have all of these great ideas, why am I asking for other people to, why am I even telling anybody else about this? Why don't I just start doing these things? And the truth is, I'm poor. I make $1,300 a month. I'm incredibly poor, and I don't have the capital to really start this business, to really try all of these different, all of these different ideas, and to see what sticks, and then to learn from that experience and develop, the next strategy 2.0, and then try that strategy and move it on. I really don't have that. I don't have that luxury, and so I'm forced to go to other people. The second reason is that I don't have the connections, and a lot of this would have to do. Well, let me explain real quickly. What part of the lobbying process of us introducing the general public to the lobbying process, what part of that would people be likely to pay for? And I think they would be likely to pay for three things, but it would come as a development over time. And the first would be information, obviously, the content, right? The content in and of itself. And once they started to trust us, once the information and the content begin to spread, then we could develop a sense of community, and that would be the second thing. So first, information, and then community, and then the third thing would be advocacy. And once you really broke the idea into the general population of, hey, there's this thing called lobbying, and you can basically get whatever you want in politics if you do it. That's not an idea that the general population is really ready for at this point in time. But once you got there, ostensibly in the near future, you could create the kind of infrastructure that allows any individual anywhere in the United States to create their own cause, rally up enough, money, so say like $100 for stage one from the people in their community, and then you would have somebody from our company, from the infrastructure, sit down and take a look at that cause and help it develop into the next stage, like maybe stage two, where you start to raise a little bit more money, like $2,000 or something like that, and then you'd keep helping these causes develop, and this would be, obviously another way to generate profit, kind of like this fourth way, but that's a long way off, so it's not even really worth talking about. But anyway, those are the three things that I think average everyday people would be willing to pay for, and obviously the first one you have to start with is information, and then hopefully the information leads to the development of community, and then hopefully that leads to the realization of the potential here, which is to get advocacy where traditional political thoroughfares and routes have failed you. And obviously I'm talking to the 98.5% of America that's not being represented right now. Okay, so in a sentence, my company is creating a platform, infrastructure, to re-engage the overwhelming majority of the population back into the world of politics. And there's so much more information, and there's so much more talking to be done, and but I'm exhausted, and I'm going to go to bed now. I forgot, but I don't have the personal connections to really talk to scientists. And I think it's really frustrating because I've been learning for the past, year and a half from scientists, trying to figure out, like, because I'm a kid, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on in the world around me. And I've been doing a lot of research, which has largely shaped the, decisions that I've made in planning. Should have seen some of my earlier plans; they were terrible. And it's really frustrating to me that these academics, like no hate, but it is frustrating how the academics, they don't, they're not the type of person, generally speaking, to take action and like do things to change the world around them. And so you've got this really weird situation where you've got all these people with all the answers as to like what's going on and what forces overall, generally speaking, need to exist and need to exert themselves upon the system in order for the system to change in such and such a way. And so it's really frustrating to listen to these people and then to know like, hey, no, this is a business model, and like I said before, it would be incredibly difficult to walk away from this as a failure, monetarily speaking. Obviously, ethically speaking, this is a goddamn minefield. Excuse my French, but from a business perspective, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. I mean, when else have you had a 98.5% market failure that nobody is aware of? Makes me salivate, right? But I guess that's the kind of person I am. I'm a dirty, evil capitalist. Hopefully I can use my dirty, evil capitalist ways to, bring some good into the world. But I don't have access to those researchers, those academics, and although I can, get on YouTube and watch their interviews, although I can, pirate their books, not that I would do that ever because that's illegal, but I could pirate all of their books and read all of their books, and they've got amazing assessments of what's going on in the world and what we can do to change it, but they don't actually do any of it. It's so frustrating to have the answer presented to you on a silver platter and then not be able to take it, not be able to contact these academics and not be able to get your foot in the door. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like I'm trapped in poverty. And I haven't yet figured out how to get out of it. I've come so far in life. I'm not going to stop here, but at the moment, it would be so much easier if I just got money and connections. Mostly the connections. If I had a little bit of money to keep me alive while I'm doing all of this, that would be great. Then I could quit my shitty job. But mostly it's just connections. Can I get into a group of academics who want to share their information with the world but don't know how? Because I know how to do that. I know how to create a podcast that people will download where you can talk about all of the things that you, the academic, have figured out over the course of your life and all the different studies. And every time you come up with a new study, let's sit down for another 2 hours and let's discuss it. And you can walk me through the process. And you have no idea how many tens of thousands, how many hundreds of thousands of people will sit down to watch this shit. And it's just that nobody's doing it. And largely, I believe nobody's doing it just because nobody ever thought about it. I'm looking at this whole situation, and mathematically and, logistically, technologically speaking, there is nothing stopping this from happening except nobody's done it yet. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it. I'm trying to create this thing. So anyway, I hope that satisfied a bit of your curiosity as to what I'm doing, and thanks for checking out this video, and have a great day, and I'm going to go to bed. Bye.